Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. On today's episode of Reality Steve's podcast, he interviews Dr. Catherine Sanderson, professor of psychology, who also went on Jane Doe's podcast several years ago and offers her insight into what might be going on regarding the Clayton Echard v. Jane Doe paternity hoax scandal. So I'm going to play a few clips for you guys here on the YouTube channel, but I really want you to check out Reality Steve's podcast, episode 378. You can listen to the whole interview. I won't do it any justice by sharing these clips, but because his audience is primarily podcast-based, I want to make sure I'm continuing to drive traffic to that full conversation. Listen to it in its source material. But for those that only find content on YouTube, I would be remiss if I didn't share it with you right here. So, they have a very interesting conversation. And by the way, these images were sent to me by somebody who was playing around with AI. They're absolutely insane. We've just got Monster energy drinks and angry horses and pregnant bellies and podcast wars. And there was even one where the pregnant horse is now using surgical gloves to make photoshopped ultrasound. I mean, a real tour de force of content out there. But let's jump into Dr. Catherine Sanderson. Again, check out Reality Steve's full episode wherever you listen to podcasts. They're available on every smartphone. Have a listen. I'll play a few clips.
Okay, we're back. And when I reached out to you to come on the pod, you had mentioned to me how much you've been following the Clayton Echard
Janie Dodo
case. We're recording this on Wednesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, like you mentioned, which would have been a really big day in Clayton Echard's history.
You don't say.
If she was ever pregnant. Because when she was under oath and when she was in a hearing back in, can't remember if it was the first one. Yeah, it was the first one where she said, I'm due on February 14th with my twins. So pour one out for Laura's twins that were not born yesterday. Anyway, moving on to this particular case. You have been following a lot of what Dave Neal has been covering. I know you've watched a lot of his videos. I'm sure you've read or been read to by Dave the court documents of, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. Being a psychologist, I'm so curious to know what you think of
Janie Dodo.
And I want to throw this caveat out there for people that don't know. You actually went on the podcast back in 2019, the podcast that she has with her mother, which is kind of fascinating in of itself.
I actually think I was on twice.
Oh, you were? Okay. Were you on after that or before that?
I was on for the first time in 2019.
Okay.
And then I was on again. And how I remember that is they asked me to be on like sometime during COVID. So I'm going to say maybe like summer. I don't remember, but I think maybe summer of 2020, they asked me to return.
Okay. So before we get into anything that happened on those, your armchair psychology professor breakdown, psychoanalyzation of
Janie Dodo
from everything that you have gathered from this case for the last 8 months.
So, I mean, my predominant feeling, and this is honestly not as a psychology professor, but as a person, is I feel really sad for her because I think she must be struggling at such a fundamental core level to have the sense that people wouldn't want to date her, wouldn't want to continue to date her unless she really could ensnare them in some way. And
ensnare, what a word. I feel the same way, and she doesn't understand this. She doesn't understand that a lot of us do feel sad, and people channel their energy into anger, but it truly is such a low energy of sorrow, of pity, of this feeling. But that can't be the only feeling because there's other people that are damaged by it, right? So if she was like just doing this to herself and no one else was affected, we would just move on and maybe even send her flowers and say, hey, read some Eckhart Tolle. I hope things get better, right? Here's a little Wayne Dyer, cheer up your mood. Go, here's a YouTube video of puppies playing in a field. feel better. But because it's a storm that's still wrecking other people, it's like we kind of have to put those feelings to the side.
That could be ensnaring them with a pregnancy, or it could be ensnaring them with threats of self-harm. But to me, my predominant feeling is really about sadness, because the level at which somebody must feel about themselves to go to such extraordinary lengths is just really sad.
It is. And in my dealings with her, Dave's dealings with her, Clayton's dealings with her, it is somebody that clearly has shown, and this isn't just obviously an opinion out of thin air, this is stuff that she has emailed to us. And as the case has gone on, we've seen more and more emails that she sent Clayton at the beginning of this quote-unquote relationship, which it wasn't. It was a hookup that Clayton basically regretted the very next day, but her mind triggered this into, I mean, to see someone send someone a dating contract after a one-night hookup and a blowjob is so bizarre to me. And just the continuation of it, and her whole MO and her emails to not only Clayton but to these other guys that we have now found out about, it always seems to be something where she says in an email, well, I'm doing, if I don't hear from you, and she always leaves some sort of...
Right. There's always this idea of, here's the hard sell. And as bizarre as it is to look back and see that she's done this to multiple men, she sort of, it's not like she ever got away with it, but clearly some of these guys entertained her contracts, tried to talk to her. So while it's so hard for us to understand how the heck this could have possibly happened, it wasn't exactly like it wasn't working for her. I mean, to some level, she was, again, not necessarily getting away with it, but it wasn't exposed at the very least like it is now. So she must feel an incredible amount of shame that there's so many people online essentially making fun of her, because it is ridiculous.
Would that be fair to say?
To say the least. Yeah, it would be an understatement.
Right. So part of the issue is that you've seen, when we've all seen like a huge amount of dialogue between like Clayton and Laura and, all of the men. But what we haven't seen is what she's telling her mother. And what she's telling her mother might, in fact, be very different. Yeah, he promised to marry me and he pursued me. I mean, it's very possible that her mother doesn't have the accurate sense of that it was a one-night hookup that she then fabricated a pregnancy out of, right?
Yeah. It certainly doesn't seem that way, unless the mother is just as delusional as Laura is. We just don't know. When I kind of look at this, and I've looked at everything, and the emails that I've had with her back and forth back between September and about a month ago, I shake my head at some of the things that she says, and I just don't understand how somebody can just continually deny something that is so obviously not true. She's just a constant, she's a compulsive liar.
Is this the world we're going to live in now that there's AI and Photoshop and we can rewrite history? Is this the world we're going to live in where more people can just completely deny facts, gaslight the hell out of others because they have a shred of information that's different? I mean, it makes you really understand how there's such a political divide, because politically speaking, you can take a truth and you can spin it in any direction you want. But with this very specific story, she's holding on to, I guess, a pregnancy test that was positive early on. And maybe in her head, she goes, if the test was positive, I can say that I believe I'm pregnant, even though new information would prove otherwise.
Just will not give in. Just out of curiosity, are you in the agreement that she should just, as hard as it is going to be for her to ever admit she's wrong and did something wrong here, I was just curious if you were under the same sentiment that I was, that her best course of action in all of this is just to be like, you know what, I made it all up. And just take your lumps, whatever that may be from the courts, whatever that may, if it means jail time, unfortunately, that's what it means. But Is that a route, if I don't know, if you were her, or if you were advising her, is that a route you would suggest?
So I think it is the best route with one caveat. I think it's the best route with the assumption that I think you're under and I'm under and Dave Neal's under, et cetera, that eventually the truth is going to come out. So, I mean, I think we all believe eventually the truth is going to come out that you did make it all up because, ultimately you're not going to be able to produce a fetal death certificate or, an ultrasound from an actual pregnancy that was yours, et cetera. But I think the challenge is I don't think she knows yet that the truth is going to come out.
Interesting. So, again, Dr. Catherine here is saying, again, a very well-respected psychologist, someone who, let's read her credentials right here, has a PhD from Princeton University, has a degree from Stanford University. She knows what she's talking about. Not only that, she has followed this case closely, not just because of my coverage, but the facts that exist out there. Facts, inarguable facts, not my opinions. Oh, if you take Dave's opinion, I'll sue you. Now, Jane Doe had Dr. Catherine on her podcast twice. Could you imagine Jane Doe probably saying, wow, we got this very respected doctor of psychology on her show. She's an expert in her field. We're so excited to have her. Wait, what is that? Dr. Catherine thinks I'm a liar? No, we no longer cease and desist Dr. Catherine from being a doctor. We'd like to desist her from Princeton University. Can we, what are the, Scottsdale police, how do we desist somebody? You know what I mean? So when it works in her advantage, she probably liked Dr. Catherine. Now she's probably like, dang, what's up with that doc spitting truth? No, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So it goes on and on and on. I'll play one more clip for you guys here at the 57 mark. I think it's fascinating. Kudos to Reality Steve for getting this interview. I mean, real fascinating stuff. Just like Reality Steve, when it comes to spoilers, no one's better than him, right? People know they can go to Reality Steve to offer spoiler information. They know he's not going to out his sources. He's a very credible and respected journalist within the Bachelor community, which is kind of funny to say because we cover such silly topics that it's like, oh, geez, but that is the case. He is the literal top cornerstone of everyone who does recapping on the show, the highest batting average of spoilers. I say all that because, and I've never wanted to be in this type of position I'm in now, where I'm the target of someone who's got what seems to be so much hate. Even a source said that Jane Doe's mom is one of the cruelest people she has ever met. This was told to me recently. Again, I've got all this information right here. It's been written down digitally, and it's just a group of people, some that want to remain anonymous, others that are willing to speak out, saying, we're not afraid of her. We just don't want her messing with her employment and this and that. We have different people. They all lived with her. These aren't people, they all lived under the same building. These aren't, if you've ever lived in a building, everyone gets to know everybody. Everyone talks. And they all say that this is just somebody who doesn't live in the same reality as everybody else. And that seems to be what we're dealing with.
That she has acted in for years.
For sure. And it's almost like that's what did her in. The fact that she went public with this is the reason why we know about the other cases now. Because if this is kept all private and she never goes to the Sun and she just talks to Clayton and Clayton is dealing with this privately and maybe he's telling family and friends and maybe he's telling Susie or whatever, but it never becomes a public story, we never find out about Greg. We never find out about Mike. We never find out about all these guys in her past that she was currently involved in.
Andrew, Matthew, Sean, non-sexual, but had a court case with him.
Cases with that were currently ongoing in the same county as Clayton. And I think maybe Clayton, after a while, is suffering the same fate that those guys are, which is just forking over a shit ton of money, trying to defend himself, and then maybe at some point just throwing up his hands. I don't know what would have happened if she didn't go forward and go public with this to the Sun. I don't know what would happen to Clayton, but I tend to think it wouldn't have been very good.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I frankly think that's why it's really good that both you and Dave spent what I can only imagine is, hundreds of hours trying to kind of unpack what all has happened. Because again, she has been doing this for years. So it is familiar to her. The play is familiar. I mean, some of the emails are literally cut and paste from what she's done before. So again, it's all very familiar to her. It's just the first time that Clayton experienced it.
Looking back on it now, in the 2 times that you went on her podcast, did you ever come out of those podcasts thinking, I mean, I didn't listen to them, but did you ever come out of those podcasts thinking there's something off about her or her mother? Was there anything that ever made you think, now seeing what's happening and what played out with Clayton and finding out about the 2 other men, is there anything that you can go back to those 2 podcasts you were on with her and say, now I can kind of see something, or no?
No, but I will also say, is, when you're on a podcast, they're asking me questions and I'm responding. You know what I mean? It's not a dialogue. It's they're asking questions, I'm talking about it. And I will say that I think people who are interested in psychology, and, that's what we were talking about, there are times in which people are interested in psychology because they are struggling with some stuff themselves, right? So there are people who say, I'm interested in psychology. And the reason that they're interested in psychology is they've struggled with mental health issues for some time.
Dr. Catherine, again, you got to go listen to the full episode. I can't hijack it all from Steve here. I just want to share why this is also important and what kind of keeps me heading in the right direction when there are moments where people in my family live in fear over what sort of retaliation she'll try to do to people like me. And she says, I'm not dangerous at all. What are you talking about? We don't know that, because danger isn't always what you can do physically to something. It's some of the emotional abuse that can be done out there, including all the threats. I received a message from one of her victims that said, I wanted to personally thank you for showing her true colors to the public. After listening to one of your last videos where you stated, if this was happening to you, wouldn't you want a helpful hand? I couldn't help but think, I finally got that helping hand. I'm hoping that this is the final straw for her and all of this chaos comes to an end, but it may be wishful thinking. We all deserve justice for the stress she has put us through. I appreciate all that you have done. This is a victim of hers. This is somebody who thought they would be able to maybe talk their way out of it. They said they bent the knee, hoping she would just go away, and they know how emotional draining it is to face her. These people keep on coming forward. They all come from different walks of life. They are men. They are women. They are people that have moved on with their life. They are people that live in San Francisco. They are people that live in Arizona. There are people that live in other states too. People that have moved away. But they all share the same story, which is the wake that they have felt from her barreling through a no-wake zone. See, society, we all have these sort of terms we live by, right? These terms we try to live by. Don't do harm to others. Don't treat others away if you don't want to be treated that way. Very basic principles we live by. And yet, it's as if that means nothing to her. And if she can get away with it, she will. And we watched that for years. The buck stops here. The ruse is over, guys. We know that. And now it's time for her to come to that realization as well. We don't want any harm done to her, both physically, both psychologically. We don't want any of that. We just want her to snap out of this spell, which I understand is asking a lot when someone's got trauma and issues and all of this. But whatever it is that's surrounding her and enabling her, I do. I mean, gosh, it might be like eating a handful of mushrooms, doing ayahuasca. I don't know. But I do believe the brain can be reworked. I mean, individual cells are born and die every single day. We can literally change the chemistry of our body when we have the intention to do so. It's above my pay grade. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm very interested to hear Dr. Catherine Sanderson talk on Reality Steve's podcast. I'll post a link below. Go to realitysteve.com. You don't need to download anything. It's free. Go listen to that conversation. Let's have more of those conversations where we try to dig our way out of the rubble. We're not trying to, sabotage or cave in the life of Jane Doe. We just want it to end. I don't think that's asking too much. Let me know what you think. I'll be live on Patreon right after this to continue to discuss the tenets that are now talking that say, this has been going on for a long time. That's on patreon.com/Dave Neal. We'll be back right after this.